things with each other, and he is trained to seek knowledge, to find out information. So if a judge indulges in research, I think he's most suited to undertake. He has an analytical mind. He can appreciate facts more objectively, and he also has writing skills, so he can translate his ideas into words and come up with a research which others can read and benefit from. So I'm very happy that judges now are undertaking research, but I was a little surprised and a little dismayed to know that the researchers in this particular research cycle did not even go to the federally administered tribal area to actually see what is happening on the ground. And their knowledge appears to be only academic, or if I may say bookish. It will be better how those people think, what is their background, and how then we can suggest reforms to them. Because you cannot import something, you cannot import a reform and plant it in a society without knowing that society at all. Things have to adjust. Things have to fall in place. There has to be a continuity of tradition. Vote a reform and plant it in a society without knowing that society at all. Things have to adjust. Things have to fall in place. There has to be a continuity of tradition. The progression has to be smooth, and people don't like things being imposed upon them. I remember that when the 25th Amendment was passed and federally administered tribal areas were merged in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, I talked to the Chief Justice of Peshawar High Court. I said, send your best judges to this area. Send your best staff to this area. Encourage your best lawyers to go and argue cases there. Why? Because there is a comparison that we have to present. We have to tell them that this is a better system. Mr. Dilawar Khan said that the previous system was expeditious but not just, but now they may get justice but not speed. So I'm sure if we send our model court judges there, the speed will also be provided. And this is exactly what I told the Inspector General of Police of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the very fine officer. And I asked him to send his best officers to this newly merged area, because you have to show the best of what the regular Pakistan is. This is an uncharted territory. People don't know any difference. They have lived in this kind of a style for such a long time. They have seen tribulations. They have experienced hardship. So present your best picture to them. And it is only through your best officers that you can present your best picture, so that people welcome this new system, and they will find it easier to integrate. Because there will be a yearning that, yes, this is a better system, we want to be a part of it. And I was told that this is exactly what is being done. There is a priority given to these areas, and very good officers as judges and as police officers are being sent to this area. I've very briefly gone through this paper book that was provided to me a few days ago, and I was impressed by the marvelous effort made. And it not only contains the history of this region, the culture, the legal system, militancy, how it grew, and then unfortunate displacement of these people, how the militancy was fought, then the issue was of rehabilitation and the present legal system and the judicial position there. Some reforms have also been suggested, and which are quite welcome, and they should be presented to the proper fora so that these reforms can be pushed. As far as militancy is concerned, this is, I suppose, another name of terrorism. On a smaller scale, it is confined to a region. In a very recent judgment, the Supreme Court of Pakistan has talked about militancy and terrorism so as to identify what kind of activity is this that we're dealing with. And if I may just read a few paragraphs, if you permit, from that judgment. It traces the history of militancy and terrorism in different parts of the world, and then tries to identify why this happened. And the sum total was that all these activities take place because of some causes, and those causes are either political or ideological or religious, mainly. These are the three different categories. So if you allow me, I'll just read a few paragraphs from this. History is full of instances where like-minded groups of people have resorted to violence as a tool for achieving political, ideological, and religious ends. Jewish sects, zealots, and Sikarai, or they were also called Sikaris, using small daggers called Sikai, hidden in their cloaks to stab people in crowds, and then melting away in the throng, attacking the Roman occupiers of Judea and their allies in public places between 2nd century before Christ and the year 70 after the death of Christ. The assassins of Persia and Syria, Muslims belonging to the Ismaili sect, who were called the assassins. Well, this word assassin comes from those assassins because they were given hashish, which was called hashishin, before being launched for terrorist acts, killing their targets and threatening the governments of several states between the 11th and 13th century. So we are not dealing with a recent phenomenon. This has been there for the last about 2,000 years. Suicidal attacks carried out by different groups against the colonial rule in India, Indonesia, and Philippines in the 18th and 19th centuries. Russian anarchists attacking members and supporters of the Tsarist regime with explosives at the end of the 19th century. Japanese kamikaze pilots launching suicide attacks against American ships in the Pacific Ocean during World War II, particularly in the Battle of Okinawa in April 1945, wherein some 2,000 kamikaze pilots rammed fully fueled planes into more than 300 ships, killing about 5,000 Americans and about 2,000 kamikazes. Hezbollah supporters launching devastating attacks against the American and French forces in Lebanon in the year 1983. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, using hundreds of suicide bombers and killing thousands of people, including Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in the year 1991 and Sri Lankan President Premadasa in the year 1993. And the Marxist Nationalist Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, carrying out many suicide attacks in Turkey against a range of targets during the end of the last century and beginning of the current century, have all been universally perceived and acknowledged as terrorists, including in acts of terrorism. So you can use the word militancy for the present purposes. There are also many other instances in history where some individual acts or collective activity were and are perceived and accepted as terrorism and not just commission of normal though heinous offenses. In the year 1881, anarchists killed the Russian Tsar Alexander II and 21 bystanders. In the year 1901, anarchists killed the United States President McKinley, as well as King Humbert I of Italy. World War I started in the year 1914 when anarchists killed Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, The British Raj referred to Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, and many other Indian freedom fighters as terrorists. Guerrilla fighters from Mao Zedong to Ho Chi Minh and Fidel Castro killed civilians during their revolutionary campaigns, and they too were called terrorists until they triumphed. After World War II, some Jewish groups in Palestine like Haganah, Irgun, and Stern Gang fought for the creation of a Jewish state, bombing hotels and installations and killing civilians, and the British, who then governed Palestine, called those Jewish groups terrorists, and many of those terrorists, including Moshe Dayan, Yitzhak Rabin, Menachem Begin, and Ariel Sharon, later became leaders of the independent state of Israel. And ironically, those former terrorists then derided terrorism, applying this label to the Arabs, including Yasser Arafat, fighting for the very same nationhood that the Jews had fought for earlier. In Germany, in the years 1968 to 1992, the Baader-Meinhof gang killed dozens, including the head of Treuhand, the German privatization agency. In Italy, the Red Brigades kidnapped and killed Aldo Moro, a former prime minister, and the Japanese Red Army was an Asian version of that. Japan was also the home of Aum Shinrikyo, a Buddhist cult that tried to kill thousands in the Tokyo metro station using nerve gas in the year 1995. In Europe, the Irish Republican Army has been a Catholic terrorist organization for almost a century. Spain and France face a terrorist challenge from ETA and the Basque terrorist organization. Lord's Salvation Army in Uganda and Boko Haram in Nigeria are universally acknowledged as terrorist outfits. The Afghan freedom fighters were called the Mujahideen, the holy warriors, by the West when they were fighting the Soviet occupying forces, but they are now being branded as terrorists when they are fighting to oust the American occupying forces. The Muslim freedom fighters in the Indian occupied Kashmir, the Sikhs led and inspired by Bhindranwale in Punjab,